Hello and welcome to the Sparkling Autos YouTube channel. No product testing today, instead I'm going to share with you my pre-wash process, which I've been working on over the past 12 to 18 months through a bit of trial and error to get it as efficient as possible. Now some of you might think that sounds a bit ridiculous, but remember that cleaning products are just liquid tools, and if you don't use them correctly, well, you might as well not bother. You see, to me the pre-wash is the most important part of the cleaning process, because if you don't do it properly, you end up with this. Bodywork covered in thousands of small scratches, which are more commonly known as swirl marks. Now under focused light these scratches are visible, but outside in daylight the end result is a dull, tired looking paint. You see, when your car is dirty and you rub that dirt with a wash mitt, a wash pad or even a sponge, well you might as well use sandpaper, as all you're doing is rubbing that dirt into your clear coat and ruining it. Which brings me to the purpose of this video, sharing my preferred process for safely removing as much dirt as possible without actually touching the car. So let's get on with it. So the first thing we need are products. Now the products you choose are entirely up to you. This isn't a product test, and the same process will work with any decent pre-wash products. And the first product I'm using today is AUTOBRITE Direct's Citrus Wash. Now just like any citrus pre-wash or APC, you can dilute this to any ratio you desire, and the more you use a product, the more you'll know what ratios you need, depending on the conditions. There's really no right or wrong here. And in these conditions, I'm using the Citrus Wash at 1:24, which has been my go-to ratio for the winter months. So to break down the cost, 5 litres of Citrus Wash is normally £32, which is £6.40 per litre. I generally use no more than 750ml of pre-wash for a car this size, which means at 1:24 I've used roughly 30ml of product, and 30ml at £6.40 a litre works out at just 19p. Sounds very reasonable so far, so let's get it on the car. Now how you actually get the product onto the car is entirely up to yourself. If you prefer using a trigger bottle, then use a trigger bottle. If you have an electric pump sprayer, then use an electric pump sprayer. Personally, I sit between those two options. I've mentioned it before, but I'm a massive fan of these Spear & Jackson 5 litre pump sprayers. Once pressurised, which takes around 25 to 30 pumps to the handle, you can do the entire car without stopping, which suits me for a couple of reasons. One, I like to get around the car quickly before the first panel starts to dry, and two, I can be quite lazy and don't want to have to pump again halfway around. If you're interested, I'll put links for everything in the description, and if you're not interested, then don't click the links in the description. Simple as that. You'll probably notice that whilst I'm also doing the wheels, I'm only doing the lower half of the car. The next step will cover the rest, so do keep watching. And there you can see, like I said earlier, I've used roughly 750ml of solution, but leaving the Citrus Wash to dwell for 5 minutes or so, which I'll come back to shortly, I now need to get my Snowfoam solution ready. And because I like to use the same brands throughout a wash whenever possible, I'm going with the very popular Magifoam from AUTOBRITE. However, there's one thing about this bottle that needs to be addressed. Place up to 2 inches of Magifoam into the AUTOBRITE Snowfoam lance. Well, I happen to have the new AUTOBRITE Snowfoam lance, and 2 inches on that is 450ml. So let's see what happens when you add 450ml of Magifoam. Oh dear. Now obviously I'm joking, and to be fair to the brand, the website has indeed been updated to state 100 to 200ml per lance. So Mark, Jill, Kevin, I hope the labels have been changed too, or we're in for a long winter as more and more people buy these lances. But as I said earlier, this isn't a product test, it's about my own process and where I am with it. And after a few trials, I'm currently adding 40 to 50ml of Magifoam to 400ml of water, which give or take is around 100ml per litre. And how does that affect our costs? Well, the price per litre is the same, £6.40, and to keep it simple, I'll calculate mine using 50ml, which is 32p, bringing the total up to a whopping 51p. So let's crack on. Before showing you my two-step method for applying the Snowfoam, I just want to take a quick walk around to see how the citrus is doing after nearly 5 minutes. And as you can see, it hasn't dried in and still hopefully softening the dirt. And that's the important part here, allowing the pre-wash to work for as long as possible before blanketing with foam, rather than applying the foam straight away. And here we go with the actual foaming then. Now this will work to some extent with any foam lance, but there will be trial and error until you get it the way you want it. So I start by turning the dial at the top to the maximum foam setting, and for demonstration purposes I'm going to dial it back one full turn or 360 degrees. And as you can see, that's nothing more than the faintest hints of a soapy water, which isn't what I want, so I'll turn the dial back to max, and this time only take it back half a turn or 180 degrees. Now that's more like it, although I know the vast majority will be looking at this and thinking that looks absolutely rubbish and there's no foam worth talking about. But remember, this is a two-step process, so bear with me while I blanket the car in what I like to call the wet base layer. By this stage, the more regular viewers to the channel might have noticed I have an assistant cameraman for this particular video, and I must say, for a first time doing anything like this, I think this particular assistant, who I more commonly refer to as Dad, actually did an excellent job, and I'd definitely employ his services again if he's interested. But back to the pre-washing, and now that the first step's complete, you'll see that I've used virtually no product, maybe 20 ml of solution max. And now it's time for the next stage, so I'll turn the dial up to maximum foam, off camera of course, but that's my fault, and then it's time to add the final layer of pre-wash. Now I will say one thing here, I was a bit distracted making sure the cameraman knew what he was doing, and what I should have done is actually narrowed the spray fan at this stage. The wide fan is ideal for the earlier step, where the objective is to thin the solution out, but for this part it's better to readjust it to a narrower spray fan. I likely just didn't initially catch on because of the car's height, but that aside, you can see that the consistency is now much creamier, much more of a wet foam as we like to call it, and in my experience this wetter blanket leads to much better cleaning results, which we will come to shortly. For now, let's get the rest of the car coated and I'll show you why I prefer this method. So that's a fairly large car covered in my two-step Snowfoam application, and I still have roughly 100 ml left, and I really must train the cameraman how to focus, which means I've used roughly 350 ml of solution. So what is different about this method, and how do I think that benefits me? Well, for a start, the pre-wash had already had around 5 minutes dwelling time to do its thing, softening the dirt, breaking it down chemically, whatever it does, and once I'd allowed it to do that, rather than rinsing it away, and perhaps crucially before it starts to dry in, I coat it with a thin foam coat. Now I'm not a chemist, so I'm only describing this in layman's terms based on what I see happen, but to me it sort of reactivates the pre-wash without diluting it, and then the thicker final coat simply allows the dwell time to be increased again for another 5 minutes, depending on what foam you use. Now there's some of you watching who use Magic Foam simply because it is a thick foam, and that's fine. You can still try this method and just add more product to your lance. We all have our preferences. But of course, none of this is worth the time if the results aren't good, so let's fast forward to the rinse stage and see if it was worth it. Alright. So now we come to the rinse stage, and to something which, for some reason, really triggers a lot of people and completely divides opinion. So I, like a lot of people, always remove pre-wash products from the bottom up, as opposed to rinsing the car after a contact wash, which I always do from the top down. The reason I do it differently is, removing suds after a wash is literally just that, removing spent product from the car. However, in the case of pre-wash removal, you're also removing the dirt, so it's important to be thorough. And for me, the best way to do that is from the bottom, so I can see exactly where I've been and ensuring I remove everything. But in reality, so long as you remove it properly, it probably doesn't really matter where you start or where you finish, so just do whatever suits yourself. And do remember also to thoroughly rinse wheels and wheel arches, as not all pre-washes and Snowfoams are kind to untreated metal. It's worth noting too here that this isn't a weekly maintenance wash. This car hadn't actually been washed for 5 to 6 weeks prior to this, and that's 5 to 6 winter weeks, so it's not just a light dusting, there's been sleet, snow and the dreaded road salt splattered all over it. I really do find pre-washing one of the most satisfying parts of the cleaning process, and I think it's worth taking your time to do it properly. Remember that every single grain of dirt you remove now is one less grain of dirt you'll be dragging across the paintwork during the contact wash. And if you're one of those people who thinks rinsing with water alone is just as effective, let me categorically tell you that you're wrong. You're just wrong. But I highly doubt anyone who truly believes that has made it this far into a pre-washing video. Now, I'm not just saying this to blow my own trumpet, but I'd say that's pretty impressive, considering that's only 51 pence worth of product, and in real terms, about 15 minutes of my time so far, including setting up the equipment. But I'll get the rest rinsed off and we'll take a closer look. So having spent a total of 51 pence, actually even less as I didn't use all of the Snowfoam solution, how much difference has that made to a car with 5 or 6 weeks worth of winter road grime? Well, starting off with what is typically one of the worst parts of the car, the lower front doors. This area takes the biggest hit, being directly in the firing line of the spray coming off the front wheels, and as you can see, that barring a few tar spots, the rest of the door looks pretty much spotless. Moving on to the rear end, another section which gets vast amounts of spray, particularly on cars with a relatively short rear overhang, and it's the same story again. A quick hello from me, and a quick glimpse of the main cameraman in the background too. There he is. But hopefully you can see again here, even as I go in as close as possible while maintaining focus, that practically all visible dirt has been removed. Which remember was traffic film, road salt, and all the other road muck you get at this time of year, specifically road muck associated with living in a largely rural environment. Just using a bit of sparkling wizardry here to open the fuel flap, and you can see that perhaps I should have been a bit more thorough here with a pressure washer, but on a 12-year-old car I do prefer to play it safe, and I can easily tackle this with a brush later on. And then we have the wheels, which have gone from needing a deep clean to just needing a much gentler quick wash with a wheel shampoo. Near side or passenger side now, which is pretty much the same story as the driver's side. A few tar spots remaining, but nothing else. And if your maintenance pre-wash is removing tar, then I would personally suggest you stop using it and find a gentler approach. So hopefully you get the idea by now that this pre-wash routine definitely gets the job done, even on a car with little to no protection and weeks worth of winter road grime, without the need to use heavily concentrated products. You just need the right process and not to rush that process. Always remember, taking your time to properly pre-wash your car can save you a lot of time and money having to polish out defects at a later stage. But what if it is too late? Well, stay tuned because I have a video coming up on that very subject really soon. In the meantime though, thank you very much for making it this far. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and I will hopefully see you on the next one. Take care.